right, well, the taxpayer-funded TARP was a big success for Wall Street, but Main Street has largely suffered alone. So says Neil Barofsky, Special Inspector General overseeing TARP. He joins us now from Washington. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
I just read through part of the 316-page report that's just out today, the latest report on TARP success. And I want to get to that point, the divide between Wall Street and Main Street. I mean, you say, look, TARP just fell short of its goals when it comes to Main Street. Explain.
Well, TARP had a number of different goals, as you said. Part of it was support for the financial industry and to prevent an entire collapse of the financial industry. And that we characterize that as mostly a Wall Street-based goal. And I think it is, without question, the Treasury's actions, along with others, were successful. And certainly Main Street benefited from that. A collapse of the financial system, a collapse of the auto manufacturers would have had terrible impact on Main Street. But TARP had other goals as well, goals related to the economy, to preserving jobs, and of course, preserving home ownership. And there, the numbers just don't lie. TARP has fallen short.
When you talk about the home ownership program, preserving home ownership, you say in the report TARP fell woefully short, that the modifications have just been abysmal. Why do you think that is? Why did this work for the banks and not for Main Street? Was it just purely targeted at the banks, and the thought was Main Street's going to follow in their footsteps in that recovery?
Well, if you look at the approach, for the banks, essentially Treasury, again with connection to the other regulators, put hundreds of billions of dollars directly as equity investments into these banks. When you have that much firepower, it's not surprising that they didn't collapse and were able to recover. On the homeowner program, and this is the HAMP program, we don't see that type of effort and that type of resources. TARP attributed just a little bit more than 200,000 permanent modifications compared to staggering numbers in the last 2 years. 5.5 million homes that received foreclosure notices since the beginning of 2009.
So, bottom line on that, Neil, is it just that there wasn't enough money put forward through TARP for Main Street, for housing recovery?
I don't even think it's money. I think it's in program design, in program and execution. It was pushed out very quickly. There have been dozens of changes to the program. There's been very lax enforcement on the mortgage servicers. Not a single one has had a financial penalty. As we lay out in the report, a lot of people have suffered at the hands of this program. And I think one of the deeper problems is that there are no goals or benchmarks, meaningful goals and benchmarks for the program. And one of the things that we observe in this report is that Treasury has started measuring success out of things that are objectively failures. They say, for example, that they've helped 1.3 million people through mortgage modifications, but more than half of those have failed. When you look at some of the real harm for folks who basically got nothing more than false hope, they get brought into these programs, they dwindle their life savings, and they get rejected, and they find out with huge bills that they otherwise wouldn't have. Their credit ratings is often harmed, and they're left in a worse position. And those aren't successes, and Treasury shouldn't be identifying them as such.
Has the bank bailout portion of TARP been a success thus far for taxpayers in terms of getting paid back and making a profit on it?
Well, if you look at it as far as return on investment, it may very well be so. But of course, there's other costs other than just dollars and cents. There's the cost of moral hazard, of increasing concentration and too big to fail. And there's been a real cost in this program in government credibility. The way this program has been run, the way some of the announcements have been made, have harmed. There's a lot of anger and mistrust about this program, and some of it is a result of mismanagement and failures of transparency. And we're going to be in a very, very bad place when the next financial crisis comes. It's going to be a lot more difficult to get their representatives in Congress to stand up and do what is necessary to protect the system if people have lost their trust and confidence in government.
So what's ahead? Because you point out in the report, look, as many may think it to be true, it is not the case that TARP is anywhere close to being over.
Legally, and what's going to happen is there's another $80 billion of TARP money that's obligated and still can be spent, and most of it Treasury still plans to spend. So we're looking at more money that's going to go out after October 3rd than in the year previous.
Any indication of where that might go?
I mean, a lot of it's going to, a good chunk of it's going to go to AIG, about $23 billion. Part of the whole recapitalization is a doubling down in many ways of more money to AIG. The housing program, hopefully it'll pick up, but there's still $40 billion, more than $40 billion that's headed out there. And then there's some smaller components of other programs. The public-private investment program still has billions of dollars that still need to go out to be expended, as well as several other programs.
Looking at it from the position you're in right now, Neil, what grade would you give TARP overall?
the TARP has so many different goals and so many different programs. It's hard to give it an overall grade, but I think it's done a great job in helping Wall Street and getting the financial system back up on its feet. I think it's not done such a good job for Main Street.